I found my credit card maxed out minus $56,000 missing before my birthday. My wife snapped. The family needed it more. My wife's sister laughed. You can celebrate alone. We had better plans. I replied calmly. Then don't ever call me again. That night, I quietly canceled the mortgage, the truck, and her loan in silence. Look, I'm not saying I'm a light sleeper, but when your phone vibrates at 2:14 in the morning, your brain immediately goes to one of three places. Someone died, someone's in jail, or your identity just got stolen by some dude named Vlad, who's currently buying a timeshare in Cancun. So when my phone lit up like a Christmas tree in the middle of the night, naturally, I figured it was option 3. I reached over, squinting at the screen with one eye still glued shut by sleep, and there it was, a banking alert that made my heart stop faster than a treadmill set to maximum incline. Balance, minus $56,000. Negative. As in, not positive. As in, I didn't have 56 grand. I owed 56 grand, and the universe had decided that 2 in the morning was the perfect time to let me know about it. Happy early birthday to me, right? Nothing screams, you're getting older and wiser, quite like waking up to financial annihilation. I mean, forget the whole midlife crisis sports car thing. I'd just upgraded to a full-blown economic apocalypse, and I hadn't even hit my actual birthday yet. This was like getting a preview of hell, except hell probably has better customer service than my bank. I sat up so fast I nearly gave myself whiplash, and for a solid 30 seconds, I just stared at that number, hoping maybe it was a glitch, a typo, some kind of cosmic joke where the punchline was, just kidding, you're actually fine. Spoiler alert, it wasn't a joke. It was my life, and apparently, my life had decided to become a tragedy without my permission. My first thought, rational, logical, the kind of thing any sane person would think, was fraud. Obviously, this had to be fraud. Some hacker in Moldova or Romania or one of those countries that always pops up in cybercrime documentaries had gotten hold of my card and was currently living his best life buying jet skis, flat-screen TVs, and probably a small yacht. I could already picture him, sitting in some sketchy internet cafe, laughing maniacally while my bank account hemorrhaged money faster than a broken slot machine. So I did what any panicked individual would do at 2:14 a.m. I started scrolling through the transaction history like a man possessed, fully prepared to call the bank, report the fraud, maybe throw in a dramatic monologue about identity theft for good measure. But then I saw the charges. And let me tell you, the truth was so much worse than fraud. Because these weren't random purchases from some foreign country. These were legitimate transactions. Authorized transactions. Not a polite chuckle, not a nervous giggle, but a full-on hyena cackle that made my skin crawl. Celebrate alone. We've got better plans, she said, smirking at me like she'd just delivered the world's greatest comeback. I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. Cold, sharp, unforgiving clarity. These people, my wife, her sister, her entire parasitic family, didn't see me as a husband, a partner, or even a human being. I was a wallet, a resource, an ATM with a pulse. And the worst part? I'd let it happen. I'd enabled it. Every time they asked for money, every time there was an emergency or a situation, I'd open my wallet and played the hero because that's what good husbands do, right? They take care of family. Except somewhere along the way, taking care had turned into being bled dry, and I'd been too blind, too optimistic, too stupidly hopeful to see it. Until now. Until 2:14 a.m. on the night before my birthday, when the blinders finally came off and I saw them for exactly what they were. I didn't yell. I didn't throw my phone or punch a wall or do any of the dramatic things that people do in movies when they've been betrayed. I just stood there, calm as a frozen lake, and said, "Then don't ever call me again." Claire's smirk faltered for just a second, like maybe she realized I wasn't joking, but then it was back. That same dismissive expression that told me she didn't think I'd actually do anything. She thought I'd cool down, apologize, transfer more money, and everything would go back to normal. She thought wrong. I walked back to the bedroom, grabbed my laptop, and sat down at the kitchen table. Midnight revenge beats midnight cake any day of the week. And as I opened up my banking portal, my mortgage account, my credit cards, every single financial connection I had to these people, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, control. They wanted to treat me like a resource? Fine. But resources run out. And when they do, you're left in the dark, wondering what the hell just happened. I was about to teach them a lesson in basic economics, and trust me, this curriculum didn't include refunds. I clicked through account after account, my fingers flying across the keyboard with the kind of precision that only comes from righteous fury mixed with caffeine deprivation. Every authorization I'd ever given, every joint account, every co-signed loan, I started dismantling them like a bomb disposal expert, except instead of saving lives, I was saving my own sanity. The truck her brother couldn't shut up about? Repossession order filed. The mortgage on her parents' house that I'd somehow become responsible for? Cancelled. In my name, not theirs. Good luck explaining that one to the bank. Her student loans that I'd been quietly paying off because family helps family, frozen faster than a popsicle in a blizzard. I didn't shout. I didn't make threats. I just clicked confirm over and over again, watching my revenge take shape in the cold, bureaucratic language of legal documents and financial transactions. By the time I finished, the sun was starting to peek through the blinds, painting the kitchen in soft orange light. I sat back, closed my laptop, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. In the bedroom, I could hear Claire snoring, completely oblivious to the fact that her entire world was about to implode. And me? I felt lighter than I had in years. Because for once, just once, I wasn't the problem solver, the fixer, the guy who swallowed his pride and opened his wallet. I was the guy who said enough. And honestly, that felt better than any birthday cake ever could. You know what's funny about betrayal? And I mean funny in that dark, twisted, I should probably be seeing a therapist kind of way. It's that once you actually see it, once you really look at it with clear eyes and a functioning brain, you realize it wasn't even sneaky. It was right there the whole time, waving at you like a contestant on a game show, and you just chose not to notice because acknowledging it would mean admitting you'd been played like a piano at a honky-tonk bar. So there I was, sitting at my kitchen table at 5 in the morning, my laptop screen glowing like some kind of digital oracle, scrolling through what I can only describe as the greatest hits of financial exploitation. Every click was a new revelation, a new stab to the gut, a new reminder that I'd been married to a woman who viewed my bank account the way most people view a public water fountain. Free for the taking and completely guilt-free. Truck repair for her brother Marcus, $8,000. Now, let me paint you a picture of Marcus. This is a guy who has never, and I mean never, met a responsibility he couldn't dodge like he was in the Matrix. He's 34 years old, still lives in his mom's basement, garden-level apartment, and refers to his job at Best Buy as corporate oppression. The truck in question? A lifted monstrosity with wheels so big you needed a ladder to get into it, covered in bumper stickers that said things like, "My other ride is your mom," and "If you can read this, you're too close." Classy stuff. Real heirloom quality. And apparently, when the transmission blew because Marcus thought oil changes were a suggestion rather than a requirement, guess who got the bill? Not Marcus. Not his mom. Not anyone who had actually ridden in the damn thing. Nope. Me. The guy who drives a sensible Honda Civic and believes in this crazy concept called vehicle maintenance. Then there was the spa package. $3,200 for a spa package. I had to read that one twice because surely there was a decimal point missing somewhere. But nope. $3,200 for Claire's mom, Susan, to get the ultimate goddess renewal experience at some bougie spa that probably served cucumber water that cost more per glass than my lunch. Now, Susan is a lovely woman if you enjoy passive-aggressive comments about your career choices and unsolicited advice about everything from your haircut to your investment portfolio. She's the kind of person who says, "Bless your heart," but means, "You're an idiot." And she's been doing it for so long that it's basically her love language. And apparently, her daughter, my wife, decided that what Susan really needed, what would really make her life complete, was a 4-hour hot stone massage and a seaweed wrap, all funded by yours truly. Because nothing says, "I value my marriage," quite like spending your husband's money on your mom's spa day without asking. It's basically the modern version of bringing home flowers, except the flowers cost $3,000 and wilt immediately. But wait, there's more. Because this wasn't just a 2-item transaction list. Oh no, this was a full-blown financial autopsy, and I was the corpse. There was a mortgage payment, $4,500, for a house I didn't live in. Her parents' house. The same house where Susan lived and complained about her aching back that apparently required a spa package to fix. Now, I'm not a financial genius, but I'm pretty sure that when you get married, you take on your spouse's debt and dreams and all that romantic stuff, but you don't automatically inherit their parents' mortgage. That's not in the vows. I checked. I went back and read our wedding vows just to make sure I hadn't blacked out during some crucial part where I agreed to fund an entire extended family's lifestyle. Turns out, nope. No clause about becoming the family ATM. But Claire had taken it upon herself to pay their mortgage. With my money. From our joint account. The account I'd stupidly set up because I believed in partnership and trust and all those other fairy tale concepts that sound great until you wake up 56 grand in the hole. I kept scrolling. There was a $1,200 payment to Fiona for wedding expenses. Fiona wasn't even engaged at the time. She was just planning ahead, which apparently meant I was crowdfunding her future reception. There was a $900 charge to some charity in her brother's name, because Marcus was apparently trying to build a reputation as a philanthropist while living rent-free and eating Hot Pockets for dinner. There were clothes, gifts, random Venmo transfers with descriptions like, "Love you, sis," and "for emergencies," each one a little paper cut on my financial dignity. By the time I reached the bottom of the list, I felt like I'd just read the world's most depressing CVS receipt, except instead of coupons at the end, there was just a big fat zero and a side of existential dread. I heard footsteps behind me. Claire. She'd finally woken up, probably because the universe has a sixth sense of timing and wanted us to have this conversation while I was still riding the high of my midnight revenge spree. She walked into the living room wearing one of my old college t-shirts and pajama pants, her hair piled on top of her head in that messy bun that I used to think was cute, but now just looked like a monument to audacity. She saw me at the laptop, saw the look on my face, and had the nerve, the absolute, unmitigated gall, to sigh like I was the one being unreasonable. "You're still up?" she asked, like I'd just been binge-watching Netflix instead of discovering that my wife had been running a charity organization with my credit cards. "Yeah," I said, not looking up from the screen. Funny thing about financial ruin, it really kills your ability to sleep. She walked over to the coffee pot, poured herself a cup like this was just a normal morning, like we were about to discuss the weather or what to have for breakfast instead of the fact that she'd committed what I'm pretty sure counts as embezzlement in 47 states. "You wouldn't understand," she said, stirring in cream with the kind of casual indifference that made my eye twitch. "Family comes first. Family comes first." I let that sentence hang in the air for a moment, really savored it, rolled it around in my brain like a wine taster trying to detect notes of bullshit and manipulation. "Yeah," I said finally, deadpan as I could manage. "Usually the one you married." She rolled her eyes. And I don't mean a little eye roll, the kind you give when someone tells a bad dad joke. I mean a full, theatrical, 360-degree rotation that I'm pretty sure qualified as an Olympic sport. I thought her retinas were going to detach and just float away, maybe go find a host who appreciated them more. "Don't be dramatic, Luke," she said, like I was the problem here. Like I was the one who drained our savings account to fund her family's never-ending crisis parade. They needed help. What was I supposed to do, say no? "Yes," I said, louder than I meant to. "That's literally what you say? You say no?" It's one of the first words humans learn, right after mama and dada. No. 2 letters. Super easy. I can teach you if you want. We can make flashcards. She set her coffee mug down hard enough that it made a sound, that sharp ceramic on granite crack that meant I'd hit a nerve. Good. I hoped I'd hit all the nerves. I hoped I'd found the nerve jackpot and was currently doing a victory dance on top of it. "You're being an asshole," she said, crossing her arms like that was going to make me feel bad. Like I was going to see her standing there all defensive and suddenly apologize for being upset that she'd financially murdered me without permission. From the hallway, I heard a door open. Great. Fiona. Because of course Fiona was still here. Of course she'd spent the night, probably in our guest room, sleeping on sheets I'd paid for, dreaming dreams funded by my demolished credit score. She shuffled into the living room wearing, and I cannot make this up, a silk robe that still had the price tag on it. A price tag that said $340. I didn't even need to check my bank account to know where that came from. "Morning, sponsor," she chirped, actually chirped like a demented bird, giving me a little wave. "Sponsor." She called me sponsor. Like I was some kind of patron of the arts, except instead of funding paintings and sculptures, I was funding her lifestyle and her sister's complete inability to understand the concept of marital finances. I stood up, closed my laptop with the kind of calm that only comes from absolute clarity, and walked over to the coffee pot. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, no cream, no sugar, just bitter and dark like my current mood, and took a long sip. Good thing betrayal pairs well with caffeine, I muttered, just loud enough for them to hear. Claire scoffed. Fiona laughed, that same hyena cackle from last night. And me? I just smiled, because while they were standing there, smug and comfortable and completely convinced that nothing would change, I had already changed everything. The truck was getting repossessed today. The mortgage payment was reversed. The student loans were frozen. Every string they'd tied to my wallet, every thread they'd used to puppet me around, I'd cut them all in the middle of the night while they slept. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and there it was, the mortgage account. In my name. Only my name. And suddenly, like a light bulb exploding in a dark room, I realized something beautiful, something powerful, something that made my coffee taste like victory instead of Folgers. I was holding the scissors to every single string. Every financial connection they had, every safety net they'd built using my money, it all came back to me. And I could cut it. I could cut all of it. And that's exactly what I was going to do. Not out of spite. Okay, maybe a little bit out of spite, but mostly out of self-preservation. Because if I didn't save myself, nobody else was going to. Especially not the woman standing across from me who still hadn't apologized, still hadn't shown even a flicker of remorse, still thought that family comes first was a valid excuse for theft. I looked up from my phone, met Claire's eyes, and smiled. A real smile. The kind that probably looked a little unhinged, but felt absolutely perfect. You know what? I said. You're right. Family does come first. She looked confused, like maybe I was having a stroke or had finally snapped. Which is why, I continued, I'm putting my family first. Me. Just me. Population one. And with that, I walked out of the kitchen, leaving them standing there with their coffee and their confusion and their silk robes with price tags still attached. Because I had work to do. Paperwork. The kind that would make sure I never had to have this conversation again. I became the scalpel. Not the sledgehammer. Not the wrecking ball. Not the dramatic explosion that people expect when a marriage implodes like a dying star. No, I was surgical. Precise. The kind of calculated that would make a neurosurgeon nod with respect. Because here's the thing about revenge. The best kind, the kind that really sticks, isn't loud. It doesn't involve screaming matches or thrown dishes or any of that Lifetime movie drama. The best revenge is paperwork. Forms. Legal documents. The click of a mouse button that says confirm and changes everything while making absolutely no sound at all. It's beautiful, really. Poetic, even. While Claire and her parasitic family were busy sleeping off their latest spending spree, I was wide awake, caffeinated to the point of seeing sounds, systematically dismantling every financial connection they had to my life like I was defusing a bomb made entirely of bad decisions. The mortgage was first. Oh, the mortgage. That beautiful, terrible mortgage on her parents' house that I'd somehow become responsible for, because apparently when you marry someone, you also marry their family's complete inability to manage money. I pulled up the account, all in my name, every single document, every signature, every proof of income statement, and I just stared at it for a minute. This wasn't even my house. I'd been there maybe 5 times, always for some obligatory holiday dinner where Susan would serve dry turkey and passive-aggressive comments in equal measure, and somehow I'd ended up paying for the roof over her head. The same roof that sheltered the woman who once told me at Thanksgiving that my job wasn't a real career because I worked in IT instead of something respectable, like her husband's failed used car dealership. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife, which was fitting because that's exactly what I was about to do. I clicked through the mortgage portal, found the automatic payment settings, and hovered my cursor over the cancel button. For just a second, I hesitated. Not because I felt bad. Oh no, that ship had sailed, sunk, and was currently being used as a habitat for depressed fish, but because I wanted to savor it. This moment. This exact moment when I took back control of my life. Then I clicked. Cancel. Confirm. Done. Just like that, the mortgage payment stopped. No more automatic withdrawals. No more me funding a house I didn't live in for people who didn't respect me. The bank would send them a notice in a few days, probably something official and scary looking that said, "Payment required," in big red letters. And Susan would have to figure out how to pay her own bills like a regular adult human. Revolutionary concept, I know. But I wasn't done. Oh no, I was just getting warmed up, and my coffee was still hot, and the sun wasn't even up yet. I had time. I had motivation. I had a spreadsheet of every financial thread connecting me to these people, and I was about to go full Edward Scissorhands on all of it. Next up was the truck. Marcus's precious baby, that ridiculous lifted monstrosity that he treated like it was a sentient being deserving of more love and attention than any actual human relationship. The truck that I'd paid $8,000 to repair because Marcus had driven it like he was auditioning for a Fast and Furious movie except without any of the actual driving skill. The truck was financed, and guess whose name was on that loan as a cosigner? If you guessed Luke, the idiot who believed family helps family, you'd be absolutely correct. I logged into the financing website, pulled up the loan documents, and started reading through the terms and conditions like I was studying for the bar exam. Turns out, when you co-sign a loan, you have certain rights. Beautiful, powerful rights, including the right to report it if the primary borrower isn't making payments. And would you look at that? Marcus hadn't made a payment in 3 months. 3 months. He'd been driving around in that compensating for something mobile without paying a dime, probably assuming I'd just keep covering for him like I always did. Well, surprise, Marcus. The bank of Luke was officially closed, and I was about to call in a repossession faster than you could say vehicular irresponsibility. I filled out the form, attached all the documentation showing missed payments, and submitted it. By noon, that truck would be on a flatbed tow truck heading to an impound lot, and Marcus would be walking to Best Buy like the rest of us peasants who understand that cars require payments. The student loans were next, and this one actually made me laugh out loud, like a crazy person alone in their kitchen at 5:30 in the morning. Claire had student loans. A lot of them. The kind of student loans that make you wonder what exactly she was studying that cost more than a small house. Turns out, she'd gone to a private liberal arts college to get a degree in communications, which as far as I could tell meant she paid $80,000 to learn how to not communicate important things like, "Hey honey, I'm about to drain our bank account." The loans were in her name, but I'd been making the payments. Every month. For 4 years. Because that's what partners do, right? They support each other's dreams and education and crippling debt. Except partnership implies mutual respect and honesty, and I was currently 0 for 2 on that front. I pulled up the loan servicer website and navigated to the authorized payer section. There I was, listed as an authorized person who could make payments on her behalf. How sweet. How trusting. How incredibly stupid of past me to think this was a good idea. I clicked Remove Authorized Payer, confirmed my identity through about 17 different security questions, and just like that, I was off the account. The loans were still hers. I'm not a monster. I wasn't trying to ruin her credit, just stop paying for it. But now they were completely, entirely, 100% her problem. She'd get a notice in a few days that the automatic payments had stopped, and she'd have to figure out how to handle it herself. Maybe she could ask her family. You know, the family that comes first. Maybe they could all chip in, have a little fundraiser, sell some of that spa package meditation energy, or whatever. I sat back in my chair and took another sip of coffee. It was cold now, bitter and kind of gross, but I drank it anyway because it felt appropriate. Everything about this situation was bitter and gross, so why should my beverage be any different? My fingers were actually sore from typing, from clicking, from filling out forms and uploading documents and doing all the tedious, boring, absolutely essential work of untangling my life from theirs. It wasn't glamorous. Nobody was going to make a movie about this where I had a dramatic monologue while rain poured down and sad music played. But it was effective, and honestly, effective beat dramatic any day of the week. I checked the clock. 6 a.m. The sun was starting to come up for real now, painting the kitchen in that golden morning light that usually makes everything look hopeful and new. And weirdly, I did feel hopeful. Not in a everything's going to be okay kind of way, but in a I just performed major surgery on my life, and I'm pretty sure the patient is going to survive kind of way. In the bedroom, I could still hear Claire snoring. That same chainsaw sound that used to be endearing when I thought we were building a life together, but now just sounded like the audio equivalent of obliviousness. She had no idea. None. She was sleeping peacefully, probably dreaming about her next family crisis that needed funding, completely unaware that by sunrise, her entire financial safety net was going to disappear like morning fog. Little did she know, the tow truck was already on its way to Marcus's house. Little did she know, the bank was already processing the mortgage cancellation. Little did she know, her student loan servicer was already updating their records. All of it happening in the background, in the quiet, boring, absolutely devastating world of administrative action. No yelling required. No door slamming necessary. Just forms and confirmations and the beautiful, terrifying power of being the one whose name was actually on all the accounts. This was what empowerment looked like, apparently. Not a montage of me getting a makeover and walking away in slow motion, but me sitting at a kitchen table in my pajamas, drinking cold coffee, and filing paperwork like the world's most boring superhero. My phone buzzed. A text message. At 6 in the morning. I picked it up, half expecting it to be some automated notification about one of the accounts I'd just nuked, but no. It was Fiona. Fiona, who was apparently awake, who was apparently checking her phone, who was apparently about to have a very bad morning. The message read, "Why is the truck gone?" I stared at that text for a long moment, watching the 3 dots appear and disappear as she typed and deleted, probably trying to figure out how to phrase her outrage in a way that didn't make her sound like the entitled leech she absolutely was. The truck was gone because I'd had it repossessed. The truck was gone because Marcus didn't pay for it. The truck was gone because I was done being everyone's backup plan. But I didn't type any of that. Instead, I smiled. The kind of smile that probably made me look slightly unhinged but felt absolutely perfect, and typed back, "Because karma drives a tow truck." Send. Done. Beautiful. I set my phone down and just sat there for a moment, letting it all sink in. The mortgage, canceled. The truck, repossessed. The loans, frozen. All of it done without raising my voice, without making threats, without any of the dramatic nonsense that people expect when relationships implode. I'd just quietly, efficiently, methodically removed myself from their financial equation. And now they were going to have to figure out how to solve for X without using me as a variable. Good luck with that. Seriously, they were going to need it. In the living room, I heard movement. Footsteps. Probably Claire, finally waking up. Probably Fiona, panicking about the truck. Probably both of them about to come in here and demand explanations, make accusations, try to guilt me back into being their personal ATM. But I wasn't worried. I'd already done what needed to be done. The paperwork was filed. The accounts were changed. The strings were cut. And me? I was free. Or at least, I was going to be. Just as soon as I took one more step, made one more call, sent one more email that would make absolutely sure that I never had to have this conversation again. I opened my laptop back up, pulled up my email, and started typing. Subject line, disassociation, make it official. This was going to be good. By Friday, they showed up at my door. Not just one of them. Not just Claire with her rehearsed apology and crocodile tears. No, they rolled up like it was a family reunion. Except instead of bringing potato salad and good vibes, they brought entitlement and the audacity of people who genuinely believe they'd done nothing wrong. I heard them before I saw them. The sound of car doors slamming, multiple voices all talking at once in that agitated way that means someone's about to have a very bad day. And spoiler alert, it wasn't going to be me. I was sitting in my living room, coffee in hand, wearing sweatpants and the kind of calm that only comes from knowing you hold all the cards and they're about to realize they've been playing poker with Uno rules. The doorbell rang. Not a polite single ring, but that aggressive rapid-fire ding-ding-ding-ding that people do when they think urgency equals authority. Then came the pounding. Fists on wood. Loud, angry, the kind of knocking that makes the neighbors peek through their blinds and wonder if they should call the cops. Her dad, Bill, good old Bill who'd never worked a job that didn't involve finding opportunities and networking, which as far as I could tell was code for being professionally unemployed, was out there beating on my door like it owed him money. Which, when I thought about it, was pretty ironic considering I was the one who'd been bankrolling his entire existence for the better part of 4 years. Behind him, I could hear Claire's voice, high-pitched and desperate, doing that fake crying thing where there's a lot of noise but zero actual tears. And Fiona, of course Fiona was there, because Fiona had a pathological need to be involved in every family crisis like she was collecting them for some kind of twisted scrapbook. I walked over to the front door and looked through the peephole. There they were, my wife's family, assembled on my doorstep like the world's worst carolers. Bill was red-faced and sweating despite it being like 60 degrees outside, wearing a polo shirt that was 2 sizes too small and showcased his beer gut in a way that suggested he'd given up on caring about appearances roughly the same time he'd given up on paying his own bills. Claire was next to him, wearing sunglasses even though it was overcast. Real subtle. Claire, really selling that "I've been crying" narrative, and doing this weird hand-wringing thing that probably looked dramatic in her head, but just made her look like she was trying to start a fire with her palms. And Fiona, sweet Fiona, was pacing back and forth with a Starbucks cup because nothing says family emergency quite like a $7 latte. She was dressed like she was about to attend a fashion show, all designer labels and carefully curated "I woke up like this" energy, which was rich considering she'd woken up like that using my money. I grabbed my #1 husband mug from the coffee table, a gag gift from last Christmas that had somehow become my favorite possession in the last week, and took a long, slow sip while watching them through the peephole. The irony of drinking from that mug while my wife pounded on the door was not lost on me. In fact, I was pretty sure irony had just reached out and given me a high five. Bill knocked again, harder this time, and I heard him yell, "Luke, open this door. We need to talk. We need to talk." That's what people say when they're about to demand something while pretending it's a conversation. Like, "We need to talk about your car's extended warranty," or "We need to talk about why you're not giving me money anymore." Hard pass, Bill. Hard pass. "Luke, you're ruining everything." Claire wailed from the porch, her voice cracking in that way that suggested she'd been practicing this performance in the car on the way over. Ruining everything. I let that sentence roll around in my head for a moment, really examined it from all angles. I was ruining everything. Me. The guy who'd woken up to a negative bank balance and a marriage that turned out to be more like a subscription service to someone else's family. I was the problem. Not the woman who drained 56 grand without asking. Not the family who'd treated me like a personal charity. Nope, I was the villain in this story because I'd had the absolute nerve to stop paying for their lives. The logic was breathtaking, really. The kind of mental gymnastics that deserved an Olympic gold medal and probably a concussion. I opened the door. Not all the way. I'm not an idiot. Just enough to lean against the frame and look at them with the kind of bored expression you'd give a telemarketer trying to sell you something you absolutely don't need. "Can I help you?" I asked, taking another sip from my mug. The #1 husband text was facing them. I made sure of it. Claire's face went through about 17 different emotions in the span of 2 seconds. Shock, anger, confusion, more anger, a little bit of fear, and finally landing on indignant rage. "Can you help us?" she repeated, her voice going up about 3 octaves. "Can you help us? Luke, you canceled the mortgage. My parents are going to lose their house." "Huh," I said, nodding slowly like I was hearing this information for the first time. "That's wild. It's almost like when you don't pay a mortgage, the bank gets upset." "Who knew?" Bill stepped forward, puffing out his chest like he was about to intimidate me, which was adorable considering he was about 5'7" and looked like a red-faced garden gnome having a heart attack. "Now you listen here, son," he started, and I held up a hand. "Not your son," I said calmly. "Never was, never will be. And if you're about to threaten me, maybe remember that I'm the one who has records of every penny you've taken from me, and I'm pretty sure the IRS would love to have a conversation about that." His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Beautiful. Nothing shuts down a bully faster than the threat of federal tax consequences. Fiona jumped in, because of course she did, setting her latte down on my porch railing, on my property, leaving a ring, adding insult to injury, and crossing her arms. "This is so typical of you, Luke," she said, like she knew me, like we were friends, like she hadn't literally called me sponsor 3 days ago. "Always so selfish. Always thinking about yourself." The projection was so strong I could have used it to watch movies. "Selfish," I repeated, savoring the word. "Yeah, Fiona, I'm selfish. So selfish that I paid for your brother's truck, your mom's spa days, your parents' mortgage, your sister's student loans, and probably that robe you were wearing the other night. You're right. I'm basically the Grinch. Except the Grinch stole Christmas, And you guys stole my entire financial future. But sure, I'm the bad guy. Claire pushed forward, grabbing the door frame like she was going to force her way in. Luke, please, she said. And this time there might have actually been a real tear somewhere in there. We can fix this. We can work this out. Just call the bank. Cancel the repossession. Put everything back the way it was. Put everything back the way it was. That was what she wanted. Not to apologize, not to acknowledge what she'd done, not to maybe consider that draining someone's bank account without permission might be wrong. She just wanted everything back to normal, back to the status quo where I paid for everything and they took everything and everyone pretended this was somehow a functional family dynamic. No, I said simply. One word. 2 letters. The word Claire claimed was so hard to say. Turns out it was pretty easy. What do you mean, no? Bill sputtered, his face going from red to purple, which was concerning from a medical standpoint, but satisfying from a personal standpoint. You can't just abandon family. I laughed. I actually laughed, right there in the doorway, and I could see it threw them off because they'd expected anger or guilt or any emotion that they could manipulate. They weren't ready for laughter. Abandon family? I said, Bill, buddy, pal, my dude, you're not my family. You're Claire's family. And Claire made it real clear that her family comes first. So congratulations, you won. You came first. You get each other. No more me cluttering things up with annoying requests like maybe ask before spending my money, or perhaps contribute something to the relationship besides demands. You're free. Live your best lives. Fiona's mouth dropped open. Claire started crying for real now, like it was finally sinking in that I wasn't going to cave, wasn't going to apologize, wasn't going to wire money and make everything okay. Bill just stood there, looking like a man who'd just realized his meal ticket had been shredded. Luke. Claire tried again, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. Don't, I said, and something in my voice must have gotten through because she froze. You made your choice. You chose your family over your husband. You chose their needs over my trust. You chose spending my money over respecting me. So now I'm making my choice. And my choice is me. Just me. Population of 1. No dependents. No parasites. No people who think love means having access to my bank account. You're going to regret this, Bill said, trying one last time to sound threatening. I smiled at him, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes, the kind that says, I've already thought this through and you've got nothing. The only thing I regret, I said, is not doing this sooner. And with that, I stepped back inside and closed the door. Not a slam. I'm not dramatic like that. Just a firm, final close. Click. Done. I locked the deadbolt for good measure, listening to them on the other side, their voices rising, arguing, probably trying to figure out their next move. But I already knew their next move. They were going to try guilt. They were going to try manipulation. They were going to try every trick in the book because that's what people do when they realize their ATM has grown legs and walked away. I walked back to the living room, set my mug down, and picked up my laptop. While they'd been pounding on my door, while Claire had been fake crying and Bill had been turning purple and Fiona had been sipping her overpriced coffee, I'd been working on something. An email. To my lawyer. The subject line read, Disassociation, make it official. And now, while they screamed on my doorstep like rejected carolers, I opened that email, read through it one more time to make sure every word was perfect, and hovered my cursor over the send button. This was it. The point of no return. The moment where I went from husband having a rough patch to man who'd officially drawn a line in the sand and poured concrete over it. Outside, I heard car doors slamming. Engine starting. They were leaving. Finally. Probably to regroup, to plan their next attack, to figure out how to spin this on Facebook where I'm sure I was already being painted as the villain in someone's vague post about betrayal and heartbreak. Let them. Let them post their sad face emojis, and there's some people just don't understand family statuses. I didn't care anymore. I clicked send. The email whooshed away into the digital ether, heading toward my lawyer's inbox where it would start the process of legally separating myself from these people once and for all. Not just divorce, though that was coming, but full disassociation. Financial, legal, emotional. The works. And as I sat there, listening to the blessed silence of my now empty doorstep, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real, genuine. I just performed surgery on my own life, and the patient survived. Peace. It was going to be okay. I was going to be okay. And well, they were going to figure out real quick what life looked like when you had to actually pay for it yourself. By afternoon, Claire had posted. Of course she had. Because nothing says, I'm going through a difficult time. Quite like airing your dirty laundry on social media where your high school friends, distant cousins, and that lady from book club can all weigh in with their unsolicited opinions and prayer hands emojis. I wasn't even going to check Facebook. I'd actually been having a pretty decent day, all things considered. But my buddy Jake texted me a screenshot with the caption, "Dude, you seeing this?" And there it was, in all its vague posting glory. Claire's cry for attention disguised as deep emotional wisdom. It's always the ones you love most who hurt you the deepest. Posted at 2:47 p.m., already with 32 likes and climbing. I stared at that screenshot for a solid minute, just marveling at the sheer audacity of it all. It's always the ones you love most who hurt you the deepest. Let that sink in for a second. The woman who'd drained my bank account, who'd funded her entire family's lifestyle without asking, who'd literally called me dramatic for being upset about losing $56,000, was now positioning herself as the victim. The mental gymnastics required for that level of delusion could win Olympic gold in every category. I scrolled through Jake's screenshot to see the comments, because of course I did. I'm only human, and watching people who know nothing about a situation offer their expert opinions is like watching reality TV, except it's my actual reality, and I can't change the channel. Stay strong, Queen, wrote someone named Bethany with way too many vowels in her last name. You deserve better, commented Angela from Claire's spin class, who I'd met exactly once and who'd spent the entire time talking about her juice cleanse. Men are trash, declared someone with a profile picture of a sunset and a username that was just inspirational quotes. Men, plural, all of us. Apparently, I'd done something so heinous that it reflected poorly on an entire gender. Sorry guys, my bad. I didn't realize that stopping someone from stealing from you was a males are garbage offense. I should probably send out an apology card. Dear men everywhere, sorry I made us all look bad by having boundaries. My mistake. Won't happen again. But the best comment, the absolute chef's kiss of unsolicited advice, came from some dude named Greg. Greg from HR. I knew exactly who this was. The guy who'd been hitting on Claire at her company Christmas party last year. The one who'd complimented her dress about 15 times and kept finding excuses to bring her drinks. Greg had written, "If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. Maybe we could grab dinner sometime." Dinner. Greg was shooting his shot in the comments section of my wife's trauma posting. The lack of shame was almost impressive. I had to give it to him. The man saw an opportunity and took it like a bargain hunter at a Black Friday sale. I texted Jake back. Let me guess, Greg from HR is already in her DMs. 3 dots appeared immediately. Dude, how did you know? Because I know the playbook, Jake. I know exactly how this works. There's always a Greg. Always some guy hovering around waiting for a relationship to implode so he can swoop in like a discount superhero offering emotional support that definitely, totally, absolutely isn't just an excuse to get in someone's pants. Greg probably had that comment drafted days ago, just waiting for the right moment to post it. Probably workshopped it with his brothers. Is "I'm here for you" too obvious? Should I add something about her deserving better? My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from my cousin Darren. Oh boy, here we go. Darren was one of those family members who existed in this weird liminal space where he was technically related to me, but had somehow become closer to Claire's family than mine. He was the type of guy who showed up to every family function, ate all the good food, and then complained about the quality of the napkins. His text read, "Did you really cut off their gas? It's freezing." I had to read that twice because surely he was joking. The gas. Someone, probably Claire, maybe Fiona, possibly Bill in one of his increasingly desperate attempts to paint me as a villain, had told people I'd cut off the gas. Like I was some kind of cartoon villain twirling my mustache and cackling while old people froze. The problem with that narrative? It was completely made up. I typed back, didn't cut it off. Just stopped paying. Big difference. Learn your utilities, Darren. Because that was the truth. I hadn't called the gas company and demanded they shut off service to punish anyone. I'd simply stopped paying for a utility bill that wasn't mine, for a house I didn't live in, for people who'd never once thanked me for covering it in the first place. If their gas got shut off, it was because they didn't pay their own bill, not because I was out here playing supervillain. But facts didn't matter in the court of family opinion. They'd already decided I was the bad guy, and no amount of logic or truth was going to change that. I watched the three dots appear on Darren's side of the text conversation. They sat there for a good 30 seconds, appearing and disappearing, like he was typing and deleting, trying to figure out how to respond to someone who'd just hit him with actual facts. The dots disappeared. No response. Just silence. And honestly, that silence was better than any comeback I could have written. That was the sound of someone realizing they'd walked into an argument with a water gun and I'd brought receipts. Victory tastes like three dots that never become words. I set my phone down and went back to my laptop, where I'd been doing something actually productive, looking at apartments. One-bedroom places, nothing fancy, just somewhere that was mine and mine alone, where I didn't have to worry about in-laws dropping by unannounced or finding out that my bank account had been used to fund someone's spa day. I'd found a decent place downtown, close to work, with a gym in the building and absolutely zero space for extended family to crash, just for a few days, that inevitably turned into weeks. My phone buzzed again. I almost didn't look at it because I was tired, so tired of the constant barrage of messages and opinions, and people who felt entitled to weigh in on my life like they were judges on some reality show. But curiosity won, as it always does, and I picked it up. Email notification. From a burner account. One of those generic Gmail addresses that's just random numbers and letters like someone had a stroke while creating it. The subject line made my stomach drop just a little bit. We didn't raise you to be like this. We didn't raise you. My parents. It had to be. They were the only we that could claim to have raised me, and apparently they'd heard about the situation and had decided to weigh in via anonymous email, because God forbid we have an actual conversation like adults. I opened the email, already knowing it was going to make me angry, but unable to stop myself. It's like touching a bruise just to see if it still hurts. Stupid, but somehow irresistible. The email was short, just 3 paragraphs of disappointment and passive-aggressive parenting that somehow managed to make me feel like I was 12 years old and had just gotten caught stealing cookies. We raised you to be a man of honor and integrity, it read. Family is everything. We're disappointed that you've chosen money over the people who love you. This isn't who we raised you to be. I had to read it 3 times because each time I hoped I'd misunderstood, that maybe there was some hidden message I was missing that would make it make sense. But nope, it was exactly what it looked like. My own parents, who I'd called 2 weeks ago to tell them about the bank account situation, who'd said, "Wow, that's rough, buddy," and then changed the subject to their timeshare in Florida, were now upset with me. Not upset with Claire for stealing. Not upset with her family for taking advantage. Upset with me for having the audacity to stop being stolen from. The logic was so backwards it could have been written by MC Escher. I sat there staring at that email, feeling a mixture of anger and hurt, and something else I couldn't quite name. Betrayal, maybe. Disappointment. The realization that even the people who were supposed to have my back, who were supposed to understand that I was the victim here, had somehow been convinced that I was the problem. Claire must have called them. Probably gave them her version of events, the one where she was the suffering wife, and I was the cold-hearted monster who'd abandoned her in her time of need. And they believed her, without even asking for my side, without even considering that maybe, just maybe, their son wasn't actually a villain. I wanted to respond. I wanted to write back a point-by-point breakdown of every single thing that had happened, every dollar that had been taken, every lie that had been told. I wanted to attach my bank statements, my receipts, my entire history folder of financial abuse, and show them exactly who their son had become, someone who'd finally learned to stand up for himself. But I didn't, because I realized something sitting there in my living room with my laptop and my cold coffee and my anonymous email from my own parents. It didn't matter. No explanation I gave would change their minds. They'd already decided. They'd chosen Claire's narrative, probably because it was easier, probably because it fit better with their image of what family should look like. And nothing I said was going to undo that. So instead, I closed the email, marked it as spam, and went back to my apartment search. My phone rang. Actual phone call, not a text, which meant someone was serious about getting my attention. I looked at the caller ID. Marcus, Claire's brother. The truck guy? The one who was probably currently walking to work because his precious lifted monstrosity was sitting in an impound lot somewhere, waiting for someone to pay the fees I definitely wasn't going to pay. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then voicemail. Good. I didn't want to hear whatever sob story he'd prepared, whatever combination of anger and pleading he'd workshopped. 30 seconds later, the voicemail notification popped up. I shouldn't have listened to it. I knew I shouldn't have. But like checking that email, like reading those Facebook comments, I couldn't help myself. I was apparently a glutton for punishment today. Luke, man, come on. Marcus's voice came through my phone speaker, and I could hear genuine distress there, which was a first. Usually Marcus sounded like a guy who'd never had a problem he couldn't ignore until it went away. The truck, dude. They took the truck. I need it for work. I can't get to Best Buy without it. You gotta call them. You gotta fix this. I gotta fix this. He needed his truck. For his job at Best Buy that he could literally take a bus to like a normal human being. And somehow, in his mind, this was my responsibility. Not his responsibility for not making payments. Not his responsibility for treating a $40,000 vehicle like a disposable toy. My responsibility. Because I was the fixer. The guy who made problems disappear. Except I wasn't doing that anymore. That guy had retired, effective immediately, and there was no forwarding address. I deleted the voicemail without responding. Then I blocked Marcus's number. Then, just to be thorough, I went through my phone and blocked Fiona, Bill, Susan, and about 7 other members of Claire's extended family who I knew would eventually try to contact me with their own versions of, "You need to fix this." My blocked contacts list went from 0 to 12 in about 90 seconds, and with each tap of the block button, I felt lighter. Like I was literally deleting weight from my life. By the time I finished, the sun was setting, painting my living room in orange and purple light that looked almost peaceful. My phone was quiet. My email was quiet. My Facebook, which I'd finally checked just to see the full extent of Claire's victim narrative, was now deleted, app and all, because I didn't need that negativity in my life. I looked around my living room, at the space that was about to become just mine, at the life I was building from the ground up after everything had burned down. And I thought about that email from my parents. "We didn't raise you to be like this." Maybe they were right. Maybe they didn't raise me to be the kind of person who draws boundaries and stands up for himself and refuses to be taken advantage of. Maybe they raised me to be a pushover, a people pleaser, a guy who values peace over self-respect. But you know what? People change. People grow. People learn. And I just learned one of life's most valuable lessons. The only person you can really count on is yourself. Everyone else is optional. And I was getting really good at clicking unsubscribe. My therapist, Dr. Lopez, had this way of asking questions that made you feel like you were being gently interrogated by someone who genuinely cared, but also wasn't going to let you off the hook with bullshit answers. She was in her 50s, had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and kept a box of tissues on the table between us that I'd never touched because I was determined to prove I was handling this whole situation like a rational adult and not an emotional wreck. Spoiler alert, I was absolutely an emotional wreck. I just had really good posture about it. We were 3 sessions deep into unpacking my marriage, my boundaries, and my apparently lifelong inability to say no to people who viewed me as a human ATM, and today's session was hitting different. "When did you first feel responsible for your wife's family?" Dr. Lopez asked, clicking her pen in that thoughtful way therapists do when they're about to make you realize something uncomfortable about yourself. Without even thinking, without filtering or trying to make myself sound better, I said, "The day her brother called me to co-sign for a jet ski in Nebraska." Dr. Lopez's pen stopped clicking. She looked up at me over her glasses with an expression that was trying very hard to remain professionally neutral, but was absolutely screaming. "I'm sorry, what?" I nodded, committing to the story now, because yeah, it sounded insane, but it had actually happened, and it was probably the clearest red flag I'd ever ignored in my entire life. "Nebraska," she repeated, like maybe she'd heard wrong, like maybe I'd said Miami or California, or literally anywhere that had a body of water larger than a bathtub. "Landlocked Nebraska, where the closest ocean is approximately 1,000 miles away. He wanted you to co-sign for a jet ski." "A Sea-Doo, technically," I said, because apparently the specific brand of terrible financial decision mattered. "He said it was an investment, that he was going to rent it out to people at the lake during summer." Dr. Lopez wrote something down in her notebook, and I was 90% sure it was just the word "wow." in all caps with several underlines. And did he? She asked. Rent it out. I laughed, the kind of bitter laugh that tastes like regret and poor life choices. He used it twice, both times just driving it around for himself, then left it in his mom's driveway where it sat for 2 years collecting dirt and depreciation until the loan defaulted and I had to pay it off to save my credit score. I could see Dr. Lopez processing this, trying to figure out where to even begin with the psychological unpacking. And you said yes to this request? She asked carefully. I said yes to a lot of requests, I admitted, and that's when I told her about the folder. The history folder. My digital museum of poor decision-making and financial abuse that I'd been keeping, not intentionally at first, just as a way to track expenses, but that had slowly become a highlight reel of every single time I'd let Claire's family treat me like a community resource. Dr. Lopez leaned forward slightly, and I could tell she was in therapist mode now, the kind where they're equal parts fascinated and concerned. Tell me about this folder, she said, and I pulled out my laptop. I brought it today specifically for this, because sometimes you can't just tell someone about the crazy, you have to show them. You have to make them understand that you're not exaggerating, that this actually happened, that your life really was that much of a sitcom except nobody was laughing except the laugh track in your head that sounded suspiciously like your wife's sister. I opened the laptop and pulled up the folder. History, it was labeled, sitting right there on my desktop between work stuff and tax documents, which in hindsight was pretty depressing. My history of being taken advantage of was literally a folder on my computer, organized by year, with subfolders for each family member. I was so organized about my own exploitation that it would have been impressive if it wasn't completely pathetic. I started keeping track about 2 years ago, I explained, clicking through the files. Not because I thought I'd need it for evidence or anything. I needed to see it, to understand where all my money was going. Because I'd check my bank account and wonder why I couldn't afford things, and then I'd remember, oh right, I paid for Marcus's truck repairs. Again, Dr. Lopez was quiet, just watching as I scrolled through document after document. Receipts, bank statements, text message screenshots, emails. Every overdraft, every emergency. Every time they called me a hero while simultaneously draining my account like vampires with debit cards and absolutely no sense of shame. Here, I said, clicking on a particularly brutal month. June 2023. Claire's mom needed dental work for $1,000. Her dad's car broke down, $1,800 for a new transmission. Fiona needed money for a security deposit on an apartment, $3,000. And Marcus needed bail money because he'd gotten a DUI, and somehow that was my problem, $2,000. I looked up at Dr. Lopez. That's 1 month. $10,800. In 1 month. And I said yes to all of it. Why? Dr. Lopez asked, and it was such a simple question, but it hit like a truck. Why? Why had I said yes? Why had I kept saying yes? Why had I watched my savings disappear, my retirement account stagnate, my dreams of buying a house, or taking a vacation, or just having a cushion get further and further away, all while funding other people's crises? Because Claire said they needed it. I answered, but even as I said it, I knew it wasn't enough. Dr. Lopez knew it too. She waited, silent, doing that therapist thing where they let the quiet stretch until you fill it with truth because the silence is too uncomfortable. Because I wanted to be the good guy, I finally admitted. I wanted to be the husband who could fix things, the son-in-law who stepped up, the guy they could count on. I wanted them to like me. And did they? Dr. Lopez asked. Like you? I thought about that. Really thought about it. Did they like me? Or did they like what I could do for them? They liked my wallet, I said. They liked that I said yes. They liked that I didn't ask questions or set boundaries or ever tell them no. But me? The actual person? I don't think they ever knew me well enough to like or dislike me. I was just a resource. Dr. Lopez nodded slowly, writing something else down. You used an interesting word earlier, she said. You called them vampires. Blood-sucking creatures that drain their victims. Do you really see them that way? I pulled up another file, this one from year 1 of my marriage. Back when I thought I was building a family, being generous, investing in relationships. Back when I was young and stupid and thought love meant never saying no. Look at this, I said, showing her a spreadsheet I'd made. Every single emergency Claire's family has had in the 4 years I've been married. 53 emergencies. 53 times that something came up that was so urgent, so critical, so life or death that I had to drop everything and wire money or co-sign a loan or pay a bill. I scrolled down the list, watching the numbers add up at the bottom. Car troubles, medical bills, rent shortfalls, legal fees, you name it. And you know what I realized when I made this spreadsheet? Half of these weren't even emergencies. Marcus's truck needed an oil change. That's not an emergency. That's maintenance he should have budgeted for. Fiona needed money for concert tickets. Tickets to see Beyoncé. That's not an emergency. That's entertainment she couldn't afford. Dr. Lopez was quiet for a long moment, just looking at the screen. Then she asked, "What's the total?" I clicked to the bottom of the spreadsheet where I'd set up a formula to calculate everything. The number sat there, bold and undeniable and absolutely devastating. $143,000, I said quietly. Over 4 years. That's not counting the 56 grand from the birthday incident. That's just the documented stuff I could prove with receipts and bank statements. The actual number is probably higher because I know there were cash withdrawals I never tracked, times I paid for dinner or groceries or gas without thinking about it. $143,000. More than most people make in 2 years. More than a down payment on a house. More than enough to completely change someone's life. And I'd just given it away. "Luke," Dr. Lopez said, and her voice had that gentle but firm quality that meant she was about to tell me something I needed to hear but wouldn't like. "This isn't a family. This is a pyramid scheme where you're the only investor." I sat back in my chair, letting that sentence sink in. A pyramid scheme. That's exactly what it was. Claire at the top, promising love and partnership, and below her an entire network of family members all taking their cut, all benefiting from my inability to set boundaries, all feeding on me until there was nothing left. And I'd been so busy trying to be the good guy, the hero, the provider, that I hadn't noticed I was the mark, the sucker, the person who genuinely believes they're part of something special right up until they realize they've been had. I kept telling myself it would get better, I said, scrolling through more files. That once they got on their feet, once the emergencies stopped, once everyone was stable, they'd stop asking. But it never stopped. It only got worse. Because every time I said yes, I was teaching them that I would always say yes, that there were no consequences, that they could keep taking and I'd just keep giving because that's what love is, right? Sacrifice. Dr. Lopez shook her head. Sacrifice is mutual, she said. What you're describing is exploitation. Exploitation. Such a harsh word. Such an accurate word. I closed the laptop because looking at those numbers any longer was going to make me either cry or punch something. And I'd already made enough questionable decisions in my life without adding property damage to my therapist's office. "The worst part," I said, "is that I have receipts for all of this. Physical, digital, undeniable proof that I was being used. And you know what? It doesn't matter. Because in their minds, in their version of events, I'm the villain. I'm the one who abandoned family. I'm selfish and cruel and unreasonable. And no amount of receipts is going to change that narrative because they don't want truth. They want a villain. They need me to be wrong so they can be right." Dr. Lopez was nodding, and I could tell this wasn't the first time she'd seen this dynamic play out in her office. "What you're experiencing is called DARVO," she said. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. It's a manipulation tactic where the perpetrator denies the abuse, attacks you for bringing it up, and then reverses the roles to make themselves the victim. "So I'm not crazy," I said, and it came out more as a statement than a question because I needed to hear myself say it. "You're not crazy," Dr. Lopez confirmed. "You're traumatized. There's a difference." Traumatized. That word hit different. I'd been thinking of this as a betrayal, a financial disaster, a really expensive lesson in boundaries. But trauma? That made it real in a way I hadn't let myself acknowledge. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. Dr. Lopez noticed. "Do you want to check that?" she asked. I shook my head. "It's probably another voicemail," I said. "Claire called yesterday. Left a message about how her dad broke his leg. Said the hospital won't operate without money. Asked me to please just call back." Dr. Lopez's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or concern. "And are you going to?" she asked. I thought about my history folder, about the 53 emergencies that had somehow all required my immediate financial intervention, about the pattern that was so clear now that I documented it, organized it, turned it into a spreadsheet that told a story of systematic exploitation disguised as family loyalty. I thought about that pyramid scheme comment, about being the only investor, about how every time I'd helped it had only taught them to ask for more. No, I said. And for the first time in 4 years of marriage, in countless therapy sessions, in a lifetime of being the guy who fixed things and saved people and said yes when he should have said no, that word felt right. It felt powerful. It felt like the beginning of something new instead of the end of something broken. Oh, the guilt tone. You know the one I'm talking about. That special vocal quality that people develop when they need something from you and they know that direct asking hasn't worked. So they pivot to emotional manipulation disguised as concern. Claire's voicemail had it in spades. Soft, urgent, with just the right amount of tremor to suggest she was barely holding it together. Luke, it's me. The message started because apparently caller ID wasn't a thing and I needed reminding who me was. Dad broke his leg. He fell off a ladder trying to fix the gutter and now he's in the hospital. They're saying he needs surgery, but the hospital won't operate without proof of payment or insurance, and you know his insurance lapsed last month when. She paused here for effect, I'm sure, probably dabbing at her eyes with a tissue in case someone was watching. Luke, please. I know things are bad between us, but this is Dad. He's in pain. Real pain. Please just call me back. We can figure out the money stuff later, but right now he needs help. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, listening to that voicemail for the third time like I was studying for a test. Each listen revealed new layers of manipulation, new carefully chosen words designed to trigger my guilt response and open my wallet. Real pain, she'd said, as opposed to fake pain? Was that a dig at me, suggesting that my financial pain wasn't real? That losing 56 grand and discovering my wife had been funding her family's entire existence with my money was somehow less valid than a broken leg? And that little pause before, we can figure out the money stuff later, that was choice. That was acknowledging that yes, she'd completely screwed me over, but couldn't we just put that aside for now, because family emergency? It was like being asked to forget someone stole your car because they needed a ride to the hospital. The audacity was breathtaking. I opened my laptop and pulled up my spreadsheet. Not the history folder this time. I'd memorized those numbers well enough that they haunted my dreams, but my current financial status. The real numbers. The how screwed am I actually spreadsheet that showed exactly how much damage had been done and how long it would take to recover. My savings account, which had once been a healthy 5 figures and growing, was now sitting at $1,247. $1,247. That was what I had left after the birthday massacre. My checking account was better, but only because I'd moved some money around and stopped all automatic payments to anyone who wasn't me. I had about 8 grand there, which sounds like a lot until you realize it's supposed to last me through rent, food, utilities, and the general cost of existing as a human being in modern America. I looked at the hospital bill amount that Claire had mentioned in a follow-up text, $12,000 for the surgery. $12,000. For a broken leg. American healthcare was its own special circle of hell, but that wasn't my problem right now. What was my problem was the simple math. I could pay the bill. Technically, I had the money if I combined my checking and savings, if I emptied everything, if I went back to being the guy who fixed all their problems while neglecting his own financial security. I could do it. The question wasn't whether I could. The question was whether I should. Whether I wanted to. Whether doing it would help anyone or just teach them that no matter how badly they treated me, no matter how much they took, no matter how little they respected me, I would always come through in the end. I clicked over to my history folder, opened a subfolder labeled medical emergencies. Because of course there was a subfolder. Of course this wasn't the first time someone in Claire's family had a medical situation that somehow required my financial intervention. I scrolled through the files. Susan's dental work, $4,000. Marcus's emergency room visit after he decided to try parkour while drunk, $2,300. Fiona's anxiety medication that turned out to be a spa retreat, $3,200. Bill's back surgery that he'd needed after refusing to see a doctor for years, $8,500. Every single time, it had been presented as an emergency. Every single time, I'd been told the hospital wouldn't treat them without money up front. Every single time, I'd paid. And every single time, There had been zero discussion of paying me back, zero gratitude beyond a quick thanks, and zero acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, they should have health insurance or savings or any kind of financial plan that didn't involve me. The pattern was so clear it was almost funny. Almost. It would have been funny if it was happening to someone else, if I was watching this play out in a movie or a sitcom. But it was my life, my money, my family. Or rather, the family I'd married into and couldn't seem to escape even after everything that had happened. I pulled up my bank account and looked at that $8,000 sitting in my checking account. I could almost hear it calling to me. Or maybe that was just Claire's voice in my head, the guilt programming she'd installed over 4 years of marriage. Family helps family, she'd say. What kind of person lets their father-in-law suffer? You have the money, Luke. You're just being spiteful. I could hear all of it, every argument she'd make, every guilt trip she'd deploy. But then I heard something else. Dr. Lopez's voice from our last session. Every time you say yes, you're teaching them that you will always say yes. And she was right. Every time I'd opened my wallet, every time I'd transferred money, every time I'd said, okay, but this is the last time, I'd been training them like Pavlov's dogs, except instead of salivating at a bell, they salivated at the sight of my bank account. They'd learned that if they just waited long enough, if they just made the emergency sound urgent enough, if they just applied the right amount of guilt, I would fold. I always folded. I was more reliable than origami. So instead of wiring money, instead of calling the hospital, instead of falling back into the same pattern that had cost me $143,000 plus $56,000 plus my mental health and my marriage, I did something different. I opened a new spreadsheet, created a new account, labeled it Freedom Fund, and I transferred money into it. Not to Bill's hospital, not to Claire's family emergency account, to myself, to my future, to the life I was building that didn't include being everyone's financial backup plan. I moved $5,000 into that account, leaving me with $3,000 in checking and my pitiful savings intact. It wasn't much. It wasn't going to make me rich, but it was mine. It was the first money in years that I'd put aside for myself, for my dreams, for the person I wanted to become instead of the ATM I'd been trained to be. I stared at that number, $5,000.00 in the Freedom Fund, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite happiness, not quite pride, but something adjacent to both. Maybe it was self-respect. My phone rang. Claire. Of course it was Claire. I let it go to voicemail. She'd already left 3 messages today, each one progressively more desperate, more guilt-laden, more insistent that I was basically killing her father by not immediately wiring money. The phone stopped ringing. 2 seconds later, a text came through. Then another. Then another. I turned my phone face down on the couch and just let them pile up like snow in a blizzard. I didn't need to read them. I knew what they said. Some variation of please, some invocation of family and loyalty, and all the words that used to work on me like magic spells, but now just sounded like manipulation with a thesaurus. I stood up, walked to my kitchen, and poured myself a whiskey. It was 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. Definitely not my finest moment from an alcoholism prevention standpoint, but it also wasn't my worst moment. And given the week I was having, I figured I'd earned it. I took my drink back to the couch and opened my laptop again. Pulled up my text messages on the computer because I was apparently a glutton for punishment. Sure enough, Claire had sent 17 texts in the last hour. 17. They started reasonable. Please call me back, and progressively devolved into desperation. He's your father-in-law, Luke, and finally landed at anger. I can't believe you're doing this to us. Us. Like we were still a team. Like she hadn't betrayed every ounce of trust I'd ever placed in her. Like us was still a thing that existed outside of legal paperwork and shared trauma. I scrolled past her messages and found one from Darren. Dude, seriously? His leg is broken. Be the bigger man. Be the bigger man. That phrase. That stupid, toxic, manipulative phrase that basically translated to let people walk all over you and smile while they do it. I'd been the bigger man for 4 years. I'd been so big I was basically a giant, and look where it got me. Broke, betrayed, and apparently still expected to fund medical emergencies for people who'd never once considered funding anything for me. I texted Darren back, not because I thought it would change his mind, but because I needed to say it, needed to put it in writing, needed to draw a line so clear that even someone as deliberately obtuse as Darren couldn't miss it. Tell them I hope he heals. But I'm not funding season 3 of the family circus. Send. Done. Block. I was getting really good at that block button. It was becoming my favorite phone feature, right up there with the flashlight and the thing that tells me how many steps I've walked in a day. My phone buzzed again immediately. A new number. They were using different phones now, probably because I'd blocked so many of them that they'd run out of their own devices and had to borrow from friends. The text was from an unknown number, but the writing style was pure Fiona. You're going to regret this. Karma is real. Karma. They wanted to talk to me about karma. The people who'd spent 4 years treating me like a mobile bank, who drained my accounts and dismissed my feelings and called me selfish for finally saying no, wanted to lecture me about cosmic justice. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. I didn't respond. Didn't block the number yet either, because I had a feeling this was just the opening salvo, and there would be more, and part of me. The petty part, the part that Dr. Lopez probably wouldn't approve of, but that I was learning to accept as valid, wanted to see how far they'd go, how many numbers they'd cycle through, how many different approaches they'd try. Would they go with more guilt? Threats? Fake apologies? It was like watching a really bad improv show, except the actors were my in-laws and the stakes were my financial future. Another buzz. This time it was my mail notification. Actual physical mail, the kind that comes with a stamp and everything. I checked my mail app. Yes, I had an app that photographed my mail because I was that person who embraced technology to an probably unhealthy degree, and there it was. A wedding invitation. Cream-colored envelope, fancy script, the works. From Fiona, my wife's sister. The woman who'd called me sponsor and was now threatening me with karma. Fiona was getting married. And apparently, despite everything that had happened, despite the blocked numbers and the repossessed truck and the canceled mortgage and the general apocalyptic destruction of my relationship with everyone in that family, I was invited. I stared at that notification for a solid minute, trying to process the absolute balls it took to send me a wedding invitation right now. The timing was either spectacularly tone-deaf or brilliantly calculated. Maybe both. I sat back on my couch, whiskey in hand, looking at my Freedom Fund spreadsheet on one screen and Fiona's wedding invitation on the other, and I started laughing. Real, genuine laughter that probably sounded slightly unhinged but felt absolutely perfect. Because this was insane. This whole situation was completely, utterly, beautifully insane. They'd stolen from me, betrayed me, tried to guilt me into funding another emergency, and now they were inviting me to a wedding like we were all just one big happy family who'd had a minor disagreement about finances. The audacity was actually impressive. I had to give them credit. They committed to the delusion. I took another sip of my whiskey and made a decision. I was going to that wedding. Not because I forgave them. Not because I was going to pay for anything. But because I wanted to see this. I wanted to watch them all gathered together, celebrating, probably wondering how they were going to pay for everything now that their ATM had retired. I wanted to stand there, in my best suit, drink their free champagne, eat their overpriced hors d'oeuvres, and know that for once, for the first time in 4 years, I wasn't paying for it. Oh, this was going to be good. I walked into Fiona's wedding like it was a red carpet premiere, and I was the star everyone secretly hated but couldn't stop watching. Black suit, black tie, sunglasses indoors just for fun, because if I was going to do this, I was going to commit to the bit. The venue was one of those overpriced barn conversions that charged $5,000 just to exist on the property, all exposed wood beams and Edison bulbs, and the kind of rustic chic aesthetic that screamed, "We spent way too much money pretending to be humble." I handed my invitation to the girl at the door, some friend of Fiona's who looked at me like I'd just crawled out of a storm drain, and walked in like I owned the place. Confidence. That's what people respect. Or fear. At this point, I'd take either. They were all there. Every single member of the family that had spent the last 4 years treating my bank account like a community garden they could harvest whenever they felt like it. Claire was near the front, squeezed into a bridesmaid dress that was doing absolutely no favors for anyone involved. Her face doing that thing where she was trying to look sad and dignified, but mostly just looked constipated. Fiona was glowing in her white dress, all smiles and fake humility, playing the blushing bride like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror for weeks. Her dad Bill was there too, leaning on a cane, not the broken leg I'd refused to fund, because apparently that had healed just fine without my $12,000. Imagine that. Looking like he wanted to start something but wasn't quite drunk enough yet to commit. Their eyes tracked me as I moved through the crowd. Every single person who'd ever asked me for money, who'd ever called me family while treating me like a resource, who'd ever made me feel like I was wrong for having boundaries. They were all watching. And I let them. I grabbed a champagne flute from a passing waiter, raised it slightly in Claire's direction like a toast, and found myself a seat in the back where I could watch this whole circus unfold. The judgment in their eyes was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. But you know what was thicker? My bank account statement that finally didn't have their names all over it. Some random guest leaned over, probably trying to make small talk, and whispered, "This is quite a wedding." I took a sip of my champagne, let the bubbles sit on my tongue for a second, and whispered back, "Don't worry, I'm not contagious. Just divorced from common sense." They laughed uncomfortably and scooted away. Perfect. I sat back in my chair, sunglasses still on even though we were indoors, and it was probably obnoxious, and prepared to enjoy the show. Free food, free drinks, and the absolute satisfaction of knowing that for once, I wasn't paying for any of it. Claire tried to talk. Of course she did. Because weddings bring out the worst in people. All that forced sentiment and open bar courage making folks think they can fix years of damage with one teary conversation next to the shrimp cocktail table. She'd been circling me all night like a shark trying to decide if the prey was worth the effort. And finally, somewhere between the salad course and the inevitably dry chicken, she made her move. I watched her approach, her bridesmaid dress swishing with each step, her face arranged in that expression that was probably supposed to look vulnerable, but mostly just looked calculated. I held up a hand before she could launch into whatever script she'd prepared in her head. "I'm here for the open bar, not you," I said, taking a deliberate sip of my whiskey. Top shelf, too. Fiona had spared no expense, which was hilarious considering she'd probably put the whole thing on credit cards she had no intention of paying off. Her eyes did that thing where they got all glossy, that manufactured sadness that she'd perfected over the years. Not from regret. Oh no, that would require actual self-reflection, but from realizing her favorite piggy bank now had legs and a working sense of self-preservation. "You look different," she said, like that was supposed to mean something profound. Like she'd just noticed I existed as a person instead of a solution to her family's financial problems. I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes, the kind that says, "I see exactly what you're doing, and it's not going to work." "It's called debt-free," I replied, and watched that land like a brick through a window. She opened her mouth to respond, probably to launch into some plea about how we could fix this, how things could go back to normal, how I was being unreasonable for not wanting to fund her family's lifestyle anymore. But I was already done with this conversation. I'd said what I needed to say. I'd shown up, proven I could exist in the same space as them without crumbling, without caving, without opening my wallet like some kind of Pavlovian response to their presence. Her dad lifted his glass from across the room, some kind of peace-offering gesture that was about 4 years and $143,000 too late. I didn't blink, didn't acknowledge it, just stuffed another crab cake in my mouth and chewed slowly, deliberately, making it clear that his attempt at reconciliation was less important to me than the appetizer I was currently eating. Because here's what I'd learned, what Dr. Lopez had been trying to tell me, what I'd finally figured out somewhere between the canceled mortgage and this overpriced wedding. Peace isn't pretending nothing happened. Peace isn't smoothing things over or being the bigger man or accepting some half-assed attempt at making amends while everyone conveniently forgets who wronged who. Peace is knowing your worth and refusing to accept less. Peace is dancing to staying alive while your ex-family sulks in the corner, wondering how their ATM grew a conscience and a spine. Peace is this, sitting at a wedding I didn't pay for, drinking champagne I didn't buy, watching people who took everything realize they can't take anything anymore. A year later, no calls, no fake texts, no, "we need help," messages popping up at 2 in the morning trying to guilt me into funding the latest family crisis. Best birthday gift ever. Seriously, people spend thousands of dollars on experiences and therapy and self-help books trying to find peace, and all I had to do was block 17 phone numbers and file for divorce. Should have done it years ago. Would have saved myself about $199,000 and countless hours of feeling like garbage for having the audacity to want my own money to stay in my own account. But hey, better late than never, right? That's what I kept telling myself as I sat in my new apartment. My one bedroom, no roommates, no in-laws, gloriously empty space that cost way too much, but was worth every penny because it was mine. Instead of waking up to banking alerts that made my heart stop, I woke up to my cousin Ava knocking on my door with a cake. Real cake, from an actual bakery, not some sad grocery store sheet cake, with happy birthday misspelled in blue frosting. Ava was one of the good ones, the family member who'd watched the whole Claire situation unfold and had the decency to tell me I wasn't crazy instead of lecturing me about family values. She set the cake down on my kitchen counter and whispered, like she was sharing classified information, "You were never the problem. You were just the first to escape." That hit different. The first to escape. Like I'd been in some kind of financial prison and had finally tunneled my way out with a spoon made of boundaries and self-respect. We lit candles. Didn't make wishes because honestly, what more could I wish for? I had my apartment, my bank account that actually had money in it, my freedom fund that was growing steadily, and most importantly, I had silence. Beautiful, peaceful, nobody asking me for money silence. We just ate cake and laughed until frosting hit the wall. Ava's fault. She'd made some joke about Marcus probably still trying to figure out how public transportation works. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Like I wasn't constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the next emergency, for the next time someone would make me feel guilty for wanting to keep what I'd earned. Claire still posts cryptic Facebook updates. I know this because Ava shows them to me sometimes. Not to be mean, but because they're genuinely hilarious in that sad, desperate way. Vague posts about betrayal and trust and knowing your worth that are so lacking in self-awareness they could be case studies in irony. Some people will never understand what you sacrificed for them, she posted last month, and Ava and I laughed so hard we almost choked. The sacrifice. The woman who sacrificed my entire savings account was lecturing the internet about sacrifice. You genuinely could not write better comedy. Fiona still pretends she's royalty on Instagram, posting photos of her blessed life, while conveniently never mentioning that her wedding put her 20 grand in debt. Their dad still plays victim at bingo night, telling anyone who'll listen about his ungrateful son-in-law who abandoned the family in their time of need. But me? I'm free, debt-free, drama-free, ex-in-law free. I paid off my credit cards, built my savings back up to where it was before the birthday massacre, and then some. Started contributing to my 401k again like a responsible adult who believes in a future that doesn't involve funding other people's crises. I even bought myself a new laptop, not because I needed it, but because I wanted it, and for the first time in years, I could make that decision without calculating whether it would leave enough in my account for someone else's emergency. I went on vacation, by myself, to a beach. Did absolutely nothing for 5 days except read books and drink drinks with umbrellas in them and not check my phone every 30 seconds to see if someone needed money. And honestly, nothing tastes sweeter than cake bought with your own damn money. Not borrowed money. Not guilt money. Not money you gave away because you thought that's what love required. Your own money. Earned by you. Kept by you. Spent on you. That's the dream. That's what freedom tastes like. It tastes like birthday cake at noon on a Wednesday with your favorite cousin, laughing about the people who thought you'd never leave, who thought you'd always be there to clean up their messes and fund their lives. They were wrong, and I've never been happier to prove someone wrong in my entire life. Here's to being the problem, the villain, the selfish one who chose himself. Turns out, I'm perfectly fine with that role. Actually, I'm better than fine. I'm free. And that's worth more than any amount of money I could have given away trying to buy love from people who were never going to give it back.